Can you all hear me? Okay. I know it's kind of quiet. I think that technically we're supposed to start at 5 past, and I'm just waiting for someone to turn up. Good to see you. Well, look, I will introduce you and give you the mic. I think we've got 3 minutes and we're trying to start on the dot. Yeah. I'm so glad to see you. I was wondering maybe you can find.
I've got my timetable mixed up and I've got another intro at 2, so I went to their class and that's why. So, yeah, I'm in the right place.
No, don't worry. I was wandering around, kind of lost, and I stumbled upon where I was supposed to go. Let me just make sure that annotated presenter looks all right. Seems to be okay. Don't know if this is the lights. How are the lights? Is that better or is it too bright? It's okay? Okay, there seems to be a few more people coming in. Okay, let's get started. Okay, hi. Welcome to English 121, 121G, Semester 2. Before I begin, however, I would like to introduce you to your Tuakana mentor for the semester. Her name is Miriama Aoki, and I think she has a few words to say to you in regards to her role in relation to you and the course. So I'm just going to give her the mic.
Thank you, Sparkle. Sparkle was actually, in my first semester at university, my tutor for a different paper for English. She's a boss, so you're in really good hands. And the tutors, some of them I have met, some of them I have met maybe last semester, but yeah, you'll be really well looked after in this course. And it's fun. It's a really fun course. I haven't taken it myself, but I've looked at a lot of the readings, so you're in for a good semester. So my name is Miriama. I'm the Tuakana mentor for all stages in English, so not just this paper. For stage 1, our workshops are run weekly. You're all familiar with the Arts 1 building? Yes. So as you walk in Arts 1, it's just on the left. It's the noisy-ish kind of colourful room. Just on the left as you walk in. That's where our workshops are held. We have food, we go through the readings, we go through course content. I make sure that you hand your assignments in on time. I'm just here to mentor you through this paper alongside your tutors. If you're not Māori and Pacific, you're more than welcome to come. Don't take that as you're not allowed. You're more than welcome to. It's just that in that workroom, in that workshop, we abide by tikanga, which might be a little bit different to how some things at university are run. But looking forward to it. Mondays, 12 till 2. If you can't make that time, 10 till 12 are my office hours, and you can drop in any time and talk about anything. Okay, nice to meet you. Good luck. Bye.
And I have Miriama's details up. I updated them this morning. I have them up on Canvas, so if you feel the need, do visit her, and to return the compliment, you will be in good hands. Okay, so let's start this lecture. This is going to be a somewhat unconventional lecture in the sense that it's the first one, and so we have to go through some of the kind of bread and butter admin issues and get them sorted. And yes, I'm going to establish some ground rules for in here, and hopefully we'll actually get to some content. Okay. All right, so just a little about me and who I am. Okay, well, my name is Sparkle Ann Gibbs, and I'm your lecturer and I'm your convener for this semester. You can address me. You can call me Dr. Gibbs if you want. Sparkle is just fine, and it's probably actually what I prefer. Just Sparkle. Don't conjugate it as a verb, just Sparkle will do. And I've taught in this particular paper since 2009. I started off as a tutor, and in recent years I've been trying to convene it. This is an English and Gen Ed paper combined. I'm sure that most of you are aware of that, and generally it's taught across multiple campuses. This semester we're teaching only on City campus, so you get all of our time and all of our attention. Will be the first time that I've convened on this particular campus. Okay, so that's me. I think the only other thing that you really need to know about me, and you can probably hear it already, I have a quiet voice. It's not the loudest voice, it doesn't really project, and sometimes I can speak quickly. Now, if my voice drops by any chance, or if I'm speaking at breakneck speed, I don't mind if you signal to me and interrupt me and tell me to slow down, or tell me that you need me to raise the volume, because there's no point in you sitting here and me just sort of going at you, or my voice being really quiet and you don't actually hear what I'm saying. So that's fine, you can just raise your hand, signal that I need to speak up, and I'll do my best to address it. During lectures as well, don't get annoyed by this, but there will be times when I will intermittently check to make sure that you can hear me. This is just an ongoing issue of mine, particularly. Okay, last thing. Okay, those are my details. You know this is where we are for lectures, and also for the Friday workshop. We're in the same room. Friday, it's 12 to 1. Okay, my office is in Arts 1 on the 6th floor, in room 609. What's it saying? Monday 12 to 1, Wednesday 12 to 1. That's not right. Should it be Wednesday 12 to 1, Friday 12 to 1? Okay, so ignore that. I'll update it, and hopefully the correct details are up on Canvas. Okay, to make life simple, I have a main email. I actually tend to use my student email, sgib024. Use that one, and I will check that regularly. However, if you use my staff email, that's absolutely fine. One way or the other, I will get to you. And the third way that you can contact me, how many of you have used Canvas to send emails? Familiar with that? Right. You can send me, as I said, I check emails all the time, so you have 3 avenues of contact to get in touch with me. Also, if you can't make that's really annoying me, my Friday, isn't it saying 12 to 1? Should be 1 to 2. Goodness grief, what's happened here? Okay, let's try this again. Office hours. Wednesday, it should be 1 to 2. Friday, it should be 1 to 2. If there's any problem at all and you can't make those hours, you can just email me for an appointment. Okay? So far so good, despite the gaffe already? Okay. Please tell me that I've gotten this right. I hope that the details, can you confirm, is that looking correct? Yep. Okay, so I'm going to introduce my tutors to you now. There's Lorenz, and he's doing the Wednesdays 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and the Thursday at 10 to 11. He's doing 4 tutorials, and he's in Arts 1, room 304, and his office hour, Thursday 11 to 1. And you can email for an appointment as well, and that is his email address. Again, these details are linked on Canvas. So that is Lorenz, one of our tutors. Next we have Steph, and she will be taking all the Tuesday classes and 1 Wednesday. She's also in Arts 1, room 304, so that's, I think everyone's in 304? Yeah. Okay, so that's a room to sort of remember, 304, and her office hours are there on the Wednesday and the Friday, and again, you can also email her if you cannot make those hours, and that is her contact email. And then we have Jose, and her tutorials are Thursdays, and she does all the Fridays as well, and she's in Arts 1. It is 304? Okay, 305, let me write that down. Okay, 305. And why have I got the wrong email there? Your email is up there, as I said. Oh, this is all kind of like, it's all on Canvas, and it's actually correct there. I don't know why it's not correct to my PowerPoints, and I'm annoyed. Okay. And then you have just met her, Mariama, email, workshop hours, office location hours, and those are correct. Okay. So that's everyone. Feel free to contact us for pretty much anything. Yes. email etiquette. Okay, so let's pretend you need to send me an email. Okay, just visualize this already. Let's keep life simple. It doesn't have to be complicated here, but do have some kind of address line, like dear, or even if it's just a greetings. Don't just simply launch into your inquiry. Use our names correctly. Our names are up on Canvas. And here's the thing about emailing any of us, this is for all of us, be concise, polite, and to the point. So it should take you 2 or 3 sentences to put in your query or request. Now here's the thing, if you find that you're writing a really lengthy missive and it's turning into a mini essay, what that probably suggests is that you need to see us directly, so just, come into our office hours or book an appointment. Lastly, do actually put your name at the end so we know who we're talking to. Tutorial day and time, your stream, and also your student ID. And I'm not doing that to be draconian, it's just that especially if you have any kind of admin issues that need to be processed, we can go through it much faster if I've got your proper name and your ID, okay? And that's pretty much it. I always put this one here about don't email me after 5, don't email me on the weekends. But truthfully, I do tend to be a bit flexible, and particularly when we're leading into an assignment, I tend to check my emails, particularly if there's, just looking out to see if there's going to be an emergency. So, do email us, do contact us. But again, if it's after 5 p.m. or over the weekend, you might not get an instant response, so there might be a bit of a delay, so be prepared for that. Okay, I think that's it. Reading, writing, text. Okay, so that's the name of the course. And these are our objectives. These are the things that we focus on in this paper. So, for the semester, we'll be focusing on academic literacy. That's our focus. So while there will be some literary texts on the course, and to start this week, we actually have a couple, this is primarily a skill-based course, and you are expected to read a variety of texts on a weekly basis. And if you've checked or looked at Canvas and seen the reading list, you'll have some kind of awareness of the type of course material we're working with. So some of these texts, not all, but some of them, they can be dense, some of them can be lengthy, and don't be surprised if, when you're reading, you have to reread and revisit some of the texts, okay? So be prepared to read more than once. And that's perfectly fine, and it's perfectly normal. It's just a normal process of reading that this course involves. Okay, so who was this course designed for, and who do I think is most likely to benefit from it? Okay, show of hands for anyone who's interested in improving their essay writing. Okay, you're in the right place, because that's what we're going to be focusing on, okay? So this ability, the ability to improve your writing in terms of academic essay writing. And, okay, so we're focusing on academic literacy, focus on academic essay writing. Okay, this whole business about reading, I think I've emphasized it, but let me just emphasize it some more. Okay, on this course, let me be frank with you. If you hate reading, please don't do this course. This is not the course for you. I mean, I'm being quite, think about it this way. If you hate reading and you're still thinking of doing this course, it would be the equivalent of me taking my numerically illiterate self up to, I don't know, the maths and stat department, and I'm sitting there telling everybody how much I hate calculation and numbers, okay? It would be the equivalent of doing that. So if you, as I said, if you're somewhat ambivalent about reading and you need to be encouraged, that's one thing. If you know that you simply dislike reading and it's something you just don't like doing, skip this course. And keep in mind that I believe that you have 2 weeks, I think, first 2 weeks to withdraw if, you've attended the classes, the lectures, the workshops, the tutorials, and it's like, this is not for me, I don't like this. You do have the opportunity to pull out. Hoping to keep as many of you on board as possible, but I do have to emphasize that if it's not for you, you have to make decisions there. Okay, so yeah, it's one of the basic things. You really do have to read. Okay, you've got the weekly readings, make sure that they're accessible to you. This division between essential and further readings, I'm not sure if you've noticed that. With some readings, I've tagged them as essential, and all that simply means is that they're the ones that I'm most likely to focus on or talk about in a lecture or a workshop. The further readings, however, they are a resource that are there for you, and they're a pool of readings that you can pull from, and you can write on those readings, okay? So those are legitimate readings, and if you want to read further, you have that option or that opportunity, especially if you are an avid reader. Okay. Names and adjectives there. Okay, writing fluently and cogently. Okay, at least in the early weeks, we are going to be concentrating on things like note-taking, drafting, proofreading, editing, and reviewing, especially as we get into the assignments. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you will walk away with an improved and an extended vocabulary so that you'll pick up some terminology and you'll become a little bit more comfortable with academic jargon, but also know how to use it appropriately. You know, you don't want to be overusing it, but I want you to also gain a familiarity with the norms, the rules, the practices, and structure of academic writing. This is a big one, the correct use of grammar and syntax. The ability to read, comprehend, and then critically analyze a text. And that's kind of a skill that I want you to sort of walk away from the course with, and not just limit it to this course, but you can apply it to anything that you do after you've completed this course. And this one here, we'll be working on over the weeks, learning how to generate a critical field of inquiry around a text. To put that quite simply, what I'm hoping is that you become the kind of readers that when you read a text and a text asks you questions, you have questions in turn to ask of that text, and that you know the right kinds of questions to ask about a text. Okay, I think that's that. Okay, is there anybody in here who doesn't have access to Canvas? Okay, everybody's good to go, that's excellent. Okay, so because you know Canvas, most of the instruction is run through Canvas, the readings, the resources, essay submission, Turnitin, announcements, emails, so you really do need to have that there. If you have any problems or glitches with Canvas, I've put up here I think that is the number and their extension. Hopefully you won't have to use it. So okay, now let's actually look at what we're delivering on the course here. I hope you guys have seen this already. Is all of this familiar to you so far? Have you guys looked around? Yep, okay. I still have to do this technically though to make sure that everybody knows what they're getting into so nobody can complain at the end, but I didn't know. So, one lecture a week every Wednesday, one workshop a week every Friday, one tutorial a week, and that can be from Tuesday to Friday. Okay, so there is a difference between three sessions, and I'm going to outline that difference now. Okay, so this is the Wednesday lecture. Fear not, our Wednesday lectures from this point on won't be like this. I won't be doing this sort of admin business. But the lectures, ideally, they're supposed to deal with the content of the readings, where I discuss the ideas, the theories, and the topics that the texts introduce. And that's to sort of assist you with your assignments, but also to get you to think critically about the topics that are in these texts, and to then think about them in other contexts and related perhaps to other media. So a sense of getting the bigger picture, as it were. Now the lectures tend to be, yes, more conventional. I stand here, I talk, I disseminate information. I do actually like my lectures to be a bit more interactive than I think a lot of people actually. So hopefully as things loosen up, I don't mind if you talk. In fact, I will invite you to do that. The Friday workshops, however, by contrast, they are supposed to be, ideally, they are more interactive and they're student-centric. So it's really more about you on the Friday. And think about the Friday workshop as sort of like comparable to a large-scale tutorial. And so you might want to see the workshops as this opportunity to gather with your fellow students across different classes and to also hear what others think or what kind of struggles they may be going through in regards to a particular text, to communicate across classes. So that's what the workshop offers. In the workshops, we will be looking at practical strategies and approaches to reading and writing, so they also tend to be more exercise-centric rather than my just standing and talking. And we'll get you to sort of think about, how to approach the text. And I think this has happened in the past where people have thought that the lectures were vital and essential and the workshops were kind of optional. I would strongly advise you to turn up to both. Okay? I do believe that they're both recorded, but here's the thing with the workshop. Because of the interactive nature of it, when it's recorded, a lot of the time there might be silences or you're hearing voices across the room. It doesn't work the same as a lecture, right? So with the workshop, you probably really want to be there in the room and doing the exercises. Okay, last but certainly not least, and some people argue that in some respects the tutorials are absolutely vital, and for some students they end up being the most important part of the course. Okay, the tutorials they're more intimate, they're smaller, of course, than the workshop, and that's really your opportunity to have your say, to just get into discussions, and to test pilot some of your ideas in relation to these texts that you've read. And the tutorials are also these spaces where you can sort of if there's anything that happened in the lecture that was confusing or confounding, or anything in the workshop that, you want to have another go at it or whatever, the tutorial's the place where you get those kinds of issues ironed out. So you also, one more thing about the tutorials is that this semester you are going to be assigned weekly exercises, and for the most part I actually want them to be set or assigned in the tutorials. So I would strongly recommend that you turn up. Those are graded. Okay, in the event that you're absent and you're not able to attend, and I've already gotten emails from people who can't turn up to the lecture, just send a courtesy email and just sort of let us know what's going on with you. Attendance isn't marked on this course, and I've actually forgotten to do it because I tend to teach on Epsom. One of the things that I do every time I have a lecture is I actually take attendance. I take attendance at lectures and at workshops. And I'm not saying that in a threatening way, like I'm monitoring you, I have my eye on you. That's not what it's about. But I will say this. You don't get marks for attendance, but attendance can matter towards the end of the year. If you're a good attender, for example, and you sit an exam and you are sitting on that borderline split, let's say it's a B plus, A minus, the good attender will usually get the benefit of the doubt or will be favoured, right? So we do tend to keep, the tutors will be keeping records in terms of attendance, and I should actually pass this around now. And I will, as I said, take attendance at lectures and workshops. So yeah, I think that's pretty much that. Ground rules. Okay, let's just get through this. This is not going to take long. Okay, I have really one main golden rule. Okay, regarding talking and interaction, I mean, this is kind of interesting. You guys are very quiet. You're not talking over the top of me. I like that. At the same time, I'm happy, as I said, if you have a query, you can interact with me, that's fine. But that's the big thing with me. If I'm talking, don't talk over the top of me, because I just can't compete with you vocally. Okay, technology in the room. I don't mind having technology in the room. I do have a preference that if you have laptops or if you're using your cell phone to take notes, I do prefer that you actually sit towards the back of the room. That way, if you happen to wander off task, you don't distract anybody that you're sitting in front of. So I do prefer laptops to be at the back. Now, if you have a particular issue, I know, with vision, or you need to be towards the front, let me know, and that's fine, but technology to the back. The tutors, by the way, they will set the ground rules for how technology works in their classrooms, and I expect you to adhere to whatever they come up with. Food in the room. Okay, technically, you're not allowed to eat and drink in the room. Personally, I don't care. Probably shouldn't say that, but I don't. Just as long as you don't, leave a huge mess for some unfortunate person to clean up, and as long as you don't, slurp or crunch your way through a lecture, but I'd rather you, had sustenance and didn't pass out in the middle of the room. So eat quietly if you are going to eat. Late arrivals, what have I got to say there? It happens, we've had some already today. Just try to get seated quickly and just be discreet. And I've already covered the business about absence, sending a courtesy notice. Okay, yeah, I think I already did the whole attendance business already. Yeah, I did. That's the other thing too. Attendance can be a factor in recommending an AGRATAT. We're very quick to recommend an AGRATAT for a student who's turned up to everything, right? Whereas if you're someone who's kind of like a ghost on the course, yeah. Assessment breakdown. Okay. Ta-da. All right. Okay, so with the in-class exercises, I just want to make sure everyone is clear on this. You know that you have 7 activities that you'll be doing over the course of the semester, okay? But you're being marked out of 10. So what does this mean? 7 activities, you do it, hand it in, you get it. You get the mark generally. However, there is a 3% discretionary mark where you do get judged according to not just how much you turn up, but what you actually contribute to the room. Okay, so there is an element of participation incorporated in those in-class exercises. All right, the assignments 1, 2, 3, and I'm trying to get assignment 2 up by Friday. Okay, assignment 1 is up already. It's 15%, it's due in week 4, it's 800 words. And you'll notice that 10, 15, 20, 25, where's the exam? Oh, yeah, there. 30%. Okay, so the assessment is incremental. It increases as you go, and the word count also increases as you go. Okay, so the scaffolding upwards. Now, this is really important because we've had some tragedies around the exam. Because our course, and yes, I like a 70-30% weighting because I think it should be geared towards coursework. Unfortunately, in the past, we've had some students who, they've done really well on the coursework, and they've, I've passed the course already. And so then they don't turn up to the exam, and then they fail the course because they didn't turn up to the exam. The exam is absolutely mandatory, so it doesn't matter if you're getting A+ across the board in terms of coursework, you must attend the exam, and if you can't, or if there's some sort of emergency, apply for an AGRATAT as quickly as possible. Okay, so far so good. Any questions, queries, concerns as I trudge through the admin? No? Okay, I've said week 4, week 7, week 10. Here are the specific due dates. They're all on a Friday. One thing that I have to think about, yes, submission. I want us to think about the fact that you have a dual submission, paper and electronic. Okay, with the in-class exercises, by the way, as I said, they're just kind of on paper generally. You can type it out, you can handwrite it, and you hand it in to your tutor. All right, I think that's pretty much it. Due dates, yeah, submission, that's the one. I've been there a couple of times. I'm hoping that all of you know where the Arts Assignment Centre, where the Arts Assignment Centre is, okay? It's apparently on level 4 of HSB. That's the address for it. If you don't know where it is, get acquainted with it, find it. So that's where you're going to do your hard copy submission. And I do believe that they close at 4. So make sure that you get your assignment in before then. And the second step for submission, other than the hard copy, is turn it in. You don't have to do anything fancy for Turnitin other than just simply upload onto Canvas. Turnitin is embedded, and yes, I've checked that it's actually working. So all you need to do is do that, and then it goes through Turnitin automatically and will process your assignment. Extension policy. Okay, there's no extensions for the weekly exercises. You do them or you don't, that's fine. The main assignments are another matter. Now, I'm hoping that no one ends up ill or having any kind of unfortunate circumstances, but life happens. If you require an extension, you can contact your tutor, or conversely, you can actually contact me directly. I don't mind. We do tend to ask for a medical certificate or letter from a counsellor, but of course, as I said, if there's a really urgent situation, at least I tend to try to be somewhat generous with extensions. Try to avoid asking for an extension because of, you have 50 other assignments due. Try to manage your time there. If you're not able to apply for an extension before the due date, and ideally that's when you want to apply, before the assignment's actually due. But if something happens, like I remember one time one of my students was in a car crash on the motorway on her way to hand in the essay. In those kinds of events, you just contact us, as soon as you're able to, and just let us know what happened, and we'll sort it from there, okay? We're quite humane, so don't worry. Late assignments, yeah. Okay, if you don't get an extension and your essay is just late, I think there's a 1 mark deduction for each day, and it sort of ticks down, and there are these windows of opportunities to hand it in. Once that window of opportunity closes, you can still actually hand in your essay assignment. However, what I will tell you though is that it won't be marked. Technically, we can't mark it once it's overly late. So if it's an extremely late submission, we can't mark it. What we can do, however, is hold on to it, keep a record of it, and we take it to the examiner's meeting at the end of the semester, and we've marked, and you can be assigned a few marks. So let's say that you're on a borderline, like you need 5 or 6 marks to pass, and you've done the essay and it's there, it can help you get over the line. So a late submission is better than an extremely late submission. An extremely late submission is preferable to no submission at all. If you don't submit, we can't help you. That's really important. So whenever you submit, even if you're really late, still submit. Plagiarism, don't do it. That's pretty much, at this point, all I really want to say there. You can read that one for yourself, but also, I'm sort of joking about it now, but we will actually be talking about plagiarism in depth, particularly when we're going over things like proper referencing, citation, what plagiarism looks like, how to avoid inadvertently plagiarizing. Okay, so if you plagiarize, you get a 0, you don't want to do that. And also too, don't plagiarize off yourself. Like, it's not good. All right, so I have these addresses here. This is in City Campus, so the clock tower. We've also got the email there and the phone number, so that's Student Disabilities. And these are also contact details. I'm just trying to think, yeah. These are specific people. I mean, if you really need to see them or contact them, you can. What their address is there. Mental health support, and there it's all through the week, Monday to Friday. Cut-off point is 3:30 p.m. or 3 p.m. You can contact them as well if you need to. The moment you've been looking for. Okay, so this is when we do the whole business with class reps. We need 2 people to volunteer to do this. It says, nominate yourself today. You can enhance your resume, improve your leadership skill set. They have food, I believe, at the end of year function. I know it's like bribery here. And you get a certificate as well, and registered with AUSA. So if you have the time and you feel that you are a responsible person who communicates well with others, raise your hands. Okay, so no one in here is responsible or communicates well with others. Okay, all right. So you to, if you can come and see me towards the end, and I'll just get your email, and then I will email you a bunch of PDFs and slides and everything else. Okay, thank you for volunteering. And I think that's it. Okay, so once we get our student reps, we will put those details up for you. And I think also you get a Facebook page, which I will never see or access. And that's a page where you can talk about the course, share resources, say anything you want. I won't be looking. So that's pretty much it for admin. Okay, how are we going for time? Is there a clock? Where? 15 minutes. 15 minutes left. Good grief. All right. Well, thank goodness we've got a workshop, I guess. And now in 15 minutes, I'm going to do another lecture. Okay, so I think I'm just going to talk this one out because 15 minutes, okay. Right, I have gotten you to read 2 essential readings. One is called The Ones Who Walk Away from Emmaus, which is a short story, and also Superman and Me, which is also another short story. So, interesting enough, I've just sort of emphasized, we're doing academic writing, we're doing essay writing, so why have I gotten you to read 2 short stories? There is actually a method behind this. What I'd like you to think about, because these 2 short stories are part of what you will hopefully be doing for your first activity over the weekend, and we'll go over that in the workshop. Okay, I've gotten these 2 because I think that I want you to start thinking about the relationship between essay writing and storytelling. Okay, typically when you think of an academic essay, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Okay, formal language. Anything else? And absolutely, that's one of the markers of academic writing. Argument. Formal language, argument. Structure. Okay, it has a specific and often quite predictable structure. You're going to say the same thing? Okay, so we've got formal language, structure, argument. Can an academic essay be without an argument? Can you have an academic essay that doesn't have an argument? Is this possible? Shrugging. Okay, well, this is something that we will talk about over the next few weeks. Somebody else raised their hand. Or was I just hallucinating? Right. Absolutely, analysis is absolutely critical. You're analysing either a text or an issue or some kind of topic. Okay, an academic essay, we tend to think that it has, some kind of argument and it problematizes something. I've chosen these 2 short stories, however, because despite the fact that you're reading them, you're obviously not going to think, aha, an academic essay. I think that they do demonstrate some of the things that we're looking for in an academic essay. That, in fact, they do have an argument, they make claims, they have a central point, and it tends to be sort of moving in one direction. So, what I want you to think about is that narrative and essay writing aren't 2 entirely separate worlds. Okay. What did I want to say here? I want you to think about how you read, because for this exercise and for everything you're going to be doing on the course, again, to emphasize that, you need to read. I don't know how many of you are aware of your own reading process, or whether you think about your identity as a reader or the type of reader that you are. I'm very, very conscious of the type of reader that I am. I love fast reading. I love to skim. I'm great at scanning. I'm good at those skills. I have those skills. So there are 2 types of reading to think about, especially when you are preparing to take notes. For this first activity, and especially for the first assignment, you are going to have to take detailed notes. All right? So, to take notes, you have to read. To read well, you have to be aware of reading practices. So, identification. That's the first thing you do when you sit down with the text. Often we make a snap judgment, we size up the text, and we determine whether or not we want to interact with the text or whether we want to go further with it or whether we're just going to drop it and forget about it. Now, you've got a myriad of texts to choose from to write on in this course, and so when you're doing this kind of process, for the first assignment, you are going to have to select a text that interests you and that you want to write on, so you're going to have to go through this process. So, this kind of identification. What type of text is this? Do I really want to go further with this? Once you've done that, you then do the quick skim. I do actually recommend skim reading. I think that it should be a part of your reading practice. It's something that you constantly do. So, get acquainted with the text at first, okay? Then, if you want specific information, you scan, okay? You look for specific things that you want to pull out of the text that are of interest to you. That can help you to determine when you're trying to write for an assignment if it's, this is the right text for you for an assignment. Like, there's stuff in there that interests me, stuff I've located, stuff I want to write about. Then we move on to the more sustained part of reading. I have some of these skills. I'm still actually working on some of them as well. I'm not as good at sustained reading as I'd like to be. That's when you sit down and it's quiet and it's focused and it's uninterrupted and you read for stretches of a time as opposed to when you skim, you just kind of like hit and run. Some people, their reading practice, the way they prefer to read, it's sort of interrupted. You're reading around doing different activities. For some people, not for everyone, but for some people this works. You read, you go to the fridge, go back to your text, you read, you go surf the net, then you go back to the text. But as long as you keep returning to the text, it can work. Annotated reading is the big one, and that's what we're going to be looking at in the workshop. This business about, I'm sure many of you do this. How many of you highlight, you underline, you circle, asterisk, the whole bit, that you mark up your text? Yeah? This is the thing. With the reading lists, all of those texts, you can download them, you get a copy, and you can always get another copy. So that's good practice to get into when you read. Then, of course, we get into the close reading, which is when you actually start, going in and looking at the fine details of the text. And then last, and I'm not sure how I feel about this one, but I'm sure some of you do it, get the machine to read the text for you. Okay, this business is about writing apps. How many of you have ever used a Perl script before? Wow, campuses are so different. Because on some of the other campuses I've taught on, they all know what a Perl script is and they use it. How many of you use Grammarly? Sort of slumps a bit. Okay, I guess I shouldn't be a hypocrite. I have used Grammarly. It's not terrible, but I would suggest, I know you're sort of laughing, it can be useful, but just use it, carefully, okay? Don't use it as a substitute for your writing, and don't use Grammarly as your proofreader or your editor. Like, you have to do that yourself. Grammarly is nice, I think, though, for looking over those last, those details that you might have overlooked, but don't rely too heavily on it. But anyway, so these are the types of reading that we will be looking at in the workshop. Okay, let me just say something about narration, and then maybe okay. Okay, so as I said before, we've got two short stories here, and they deal with storytelling, which of course is an ordinary daily occurrence. Dealing with the word here, narrative. Okay, it's derived from the Latin narrare, which means to tell, relate, to recount, to explain, to make acquainted with. I've bolded that one there, to make acquainted with. If you want someone to know or understand your position, or to have some idea of an experience you have, you will almost automatically start telling them a story. This is what we tend to do. So it's not surprising then that the word narrare, the Latin, actually comes from the Greek gnosis, which means to know. So if you want to know something, tell a story. You want to know about someone, you listen to their story. Making sense? Okay. Okay. So as I've said before, it appears to be, people often think that narrative is distinct from and unrelated to academic writing. Now, the assertion or the claim or the argument that I'm going to make here and now is that whenever you write an essay, you do engage in some form of actual storytelling. Many ways to go about this. If you're writing an essay, you might deploy little personal anecdotes throughout your essay to help illustrate a point. But whenever you write an essay, the overarching thing that you are writing, the thing that you are producing, it is in fact telling some kind of story. Sorry, time again? 5 minutes, okay. All right, and now I'm going to pull something from do we have to actually wrap up? I see people starting to pack up classes to go to. Sorry, I haven't taught on City Campus for a while. No? Still good? Okay. All right, very quickly. Okay, this is a quote that I've pulled from one of the further readings that you may not have looked at, but I thought that it's nice for our purpose here. This is a quote from it that talks about storytelling as this essential human activity. It says it's a Paleolithic one, and this is something that is hardwired into us as human beings. It's the campfire and the tribal circle, the shaman and the nomad, one especially applicable to folklore, fairy tales, and mythology. Okay, you've got 2 texts. Of the 2 texts, essential texts I've asked you to read, which one obviously falls into this particular category? Take a guess. I'm assuming you did read them both, of course. The ones who walk away from a malice. Okay, so that's definitely, I think, falls into that category. Folklore, fairy tales, mythology. Okay, now this is another claim that this particular text, this further reading, makes. Talks about this notion of, okay, we tell stories because we want information or we want to get acquainted with something or to know or understand a situation. But there's a second, even bolder and more fundamental claim made about storytelling. That what storytelling does is it has this very didactic function. Stories teach us how to survive, is the claim. They tell us that our lives can be transcendent, that we can overcome almost anything, no matter how strange. That we can go into the black wood and come out again. That the witch can be burned up in her own oven. That we can find someone who fits a shoe. That the youngest and loved child will find their way in the world. That those who suffer can become strong, can escape, can find their way into comfort and joy again. That there are secrets and they are always worth discovering. That there are more and different creatures in the world than we can ever imagine and not all want to eat us. And here's the thing, stories teach us how to win, how to persevere, how to live. Okay, those last words I've bolded there and I'll have to say something 10 minutes at the start of the workshop there. But that notion about how to live, or perhaps the question of what is the appropriate way to live, I think that the story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Malice, pretty much poses that question or that moral dilemma. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Come to class, bring your texts with you, and also bring any questions you have regarding these texts, and we'll go over them. Okay, thank you. terms of getting native speakers past the course and pass. I won't pretend that it won't be something of a struggle for you. It could be a stick of the semester, but it's certainly not impossible for you to pass, especially in terms of how much work you're going to put in. And also, there are external sources of support that you can go to, like there's a subject librarian. I think there's some program up at Cape that gives common, and I will put up that sort of information there. So there is language support around as well, and you can also get people, as I said, you can also get help in terms of proofreading and editing. So it's not impossible to pass, but it might be a little tricky. I'm going to ask you.
For this course, I have to focus on perfect English writing. Because I scan the answers.
The thing is that okay, there is an element where we want you to write as well as possible,
Yeah.
but at the same time we are interested in your critical thinking and your ideas. And this is the thing. Stick with it maybe until Friday and see what you think. Here's the opportunity you've got. I think it's the first 2 weeks. If it's not for you and you're really worried, you can.
Okay. Because this is the last paper in my.
Right, and you want to get through it. You
Yeah,
want to pass.
yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you stay with us.
Thank you.
I put my hand up for the class rep thing because nobody else did,
Okay.
and I felt bad.
Yeah,
But
same.
And
Me
felt bad,
too.
felt sorry for me.
yeah,
Hung out dry.
well, second, I'm probably not responsible enough to be a class rep.
And this is the thing, if you've got one responsible person with you, because I've often seen class where it's like, buddy out, you don't have to, there's no pressure.
Okay, I was thinking now you're not gonna know if I don't show up to class. I guess now you're not gonna know anyways. But
Oh, right, as I said, there's no guilt, I don't guilt anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're really thinking like, no, it's not for me,
yeah, probably
you
not.
don't have to bail me out because you feel sorry
I
for
know.
standing in front of you. I can find someone else.
Alright.
But thank you, I appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You are going to stay on?
Yeah.
I just have a question about the course. Will the lectures be recorded and posted? Cool. Sweet. So,
That's all you want to know? Okay, I will get your details.
Okay.
Hello, how can I help?
Hi.
Oh, you just signing the list?
Yeah, I actually had a question, but I think you already answered it about if English. I speak English, however, I've never attended school in English.
Right, so
I was
it's sort of
wondering
different,
about
yeah.
that. But I see that you said
As I said, it's
It's
possible.
work,
It's
but-
possible, but it's hard work. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie to you.
I'm willing to.
You're willing to
Put
work?
that-
Okay, well, if you're willing to
that
work,
work.
we're willing to help.
Yeah. And for this, maybe next, just wondering, we could put like 4 papers or something. So
Oh,
it
yeah,
gets
no,
through,
I,
'cause
this
it
is,
went
I
through
forgot.
the
No, I
2
usually
first
actually
rounds.
bring a roll, but I forgot today. This is the first day and there's,
Thank you.
you're right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. I better get out of there here.
I wanted to volunteer, but I forgot. Like, I was afraid I'd have to come up and make a speech. Like, in last semester, I had to do that, and it was really
I
embarrassing.
don't force people to do speeches, but if you do want to make an
Oh,
announcement,
no,
you can.
thank you.
No, thanks? Okay. Well, anyway, so, sorry, so is this you?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, can I have your email as
Yeah,
well?
of course.
All those details were wrong, and I don't know why.
I think it looked like you just copy pasted it, so you
Yeah.
forgot to fill it out.
I think, yeah, that must have been right.
Yeah. Should I tell tutor tutorials that?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, not your bad because I didn't want to say it before. Yeah.
Okay, so Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not your bad because it was not mentioned before. Yeah.
Oh. I sort of off the hook for now.
Yeah.
I will have to follow up this whole class business
Yeah.
because that's scaring the life out of me.
Is it readable? That's an L. That's just-
GBEL?
Yes.
Got it. All right. I will email you all
Thank
the stuff.
you.
Thank you so much for volunteering. Get out of these people's hair.
Yeah. If it's being deleted out tomorrow, it's just like an admin use. But if it's not being deleted and they're just missing, I'm like, I don't know what I do about that.
Right. Okay. Well, as I said, if it's actually been deleted because that affects your contract,
Yeah,
then I will have
It's
to
an admin.
email. Yes, and I will have to email on me, and that's not a problem.
All right. Before we begin, I got a couple of emails about the recording links. Okay? So there are two places on Canvas that you can find the recording links. So one of them is obviously recordings. Okay? I learned that I have to actually publish those recording links, so which I will do pretty quickly as soon as I find them, okay, on Canvas. So that's one place where you can find recordings. Now, strangely enough, I still get other links, okay, via email, so that I will post under modules under each week, okay? Now, that will take some time because I will have to receive the email and then copy and paste and log on to Canvas again and copy and paste the link. So give me like a 24-hour lead time on those, okay? But the advantage, I guess, is that you can choose what sort of resolution you want to download, right? So this, so for Tuesday, right, I already uploaded the links here. So. Okay. And that's basically the structure of modules under each week. So the first one is lecture slides, links to those files under files. Yeah? And then the second one up is lecture recordings, okay, for each day. And then the third item on this page is workshop-related materials. So all the workshop questions will be there, okay, links at least, and the answers there, and the lecture recordings for the workshops will be posted under workshop there as well. Right? So that sums up a week for us. All right. Okay, so that's recordings. Any questions so far on Canvas? No? All right. So let's move on to lecture slides. All right. All right. So we did a stats review yesterday, and we are moving on to algebra today. Again, this will be pretty basic algebra. Okay, so you might say, oh, it's boring. But the point is, okay, this is all the algebra that you will need in this course. Okay? Plus, I expect it to be I expect you to be fairly quick and smooth when you do these basic algebras. Okay. So I don't expect you to spend like 10 minutes to invert an equation, for instance. So if you're kind of rusty on this, okay, I will post quite a few workshop questions, as well as there are end of chapter problems. So keep practicing on this a few times. If you try a few questions, then you will get the hang of it, and you should be fine. All right. So first off is inverting an equation. So here, the most basic equation is additive equation. So x plus a is equal to b. All right, that's an equation. All right. Now here, when you look at an equation, it's important to distinguish between a variable and a constant. Right. So x and y, and oftentimes z, they're kind of reserved oftentimes for variable. Okay, variable of interest. So in our mind, they can change in value, and we want to find the particular value for the variable that meets the requirement of the equation. All right. So, and on the other hand, a and b, although they're denoted by letters, in our mind, they are constants. Their values are preset, and those values don't change, okay? So here, oftentimes, what we do is we solve this equation for the variable of interest, in this case, x. Okay? How do we solve this equation for x? That's the question. So it's basically divide and conquer. All right, the basic strategy is divide and conquer. We divide things up, okay, and conquer the things that we don't like. All right, so what we want is basically isolate this x, all right? And we notice that there's a nuisance there, which is an a added to x. So we want to get rid of this x, get rid of this a. How do we do that? Well, if we can subtract a from the left-hand side, well, we will be good, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do, but to keep the equation intact, we need to do the same operation on both end sides, right? So because we want to subtract a from the left-hand side, we have to do the same on the right-hand side, and if we do that, x is equal to the same equation is transformed into another equation, x equal to b minus a. And that's basically that gives us the answer, right? X in this case has to be p minus a to satisfy this equation. Now we also can have a multiplicative term in the equation. So c times x is equal to d. Now again, the exact same principle. We want to divide the left-hand side by c. Okay? We do the same on the right-hand side. So in this case, x is equal to t over c. Right? Now, if we combine both additive and multiplicative term, for instance, e times x plus f is equal to g. Right? Now, the order matters here. So when we get rid of the terms that we don't want from the left-hand side, we first need to get rid of the additive term first, right? So we move the term or subtract f from the left-hand side and also on the right-hand side. So then ex is equal to g minus f, and then we apply the second principle there. Then x is equal to g minus f, whole thing divided by e. Okay? So that's basically the how we invert a single equation in this course. Now, this you will have oftentimes. What I found is that you have no problem doing this with numbers, right? Oftentimes, what I find is that the problem lies when we deal with letters. Right? But notice that what you're doing in numbers, okay, works exactly. That works when you work with letters as well. Right? So in particular, when I give you the formula sheet, oh, by the way, I always give a formula sheet in the test and exam. So all the equations that you see on the slides will be on the formula sheet. Right? Now, when I give you a formula sheet, okay, I don't give you all different versions of the same equation. I give you only one version of the equation, expecting you to be able to invert the equation the way you see fit. Okay? So it's important that you know how to work with letters as well, right, given an equation. All right, so to give you an example, this is the infamous cost of equity equation that you know. Right? Later on, we will give it another name, CAPM or SML. So let's say, so you know what this equation does. Well, but as here, it's just an equation. Right? So what are the variables? Variables are the expected return on the left-hand side and a beta on the right-hand side. So this depicts the relation between beta and expected return, risk and return, right? Which will be the theme in a few weeks later. Anyway, so let's say we happen to know that expected return on this particular stock or company is 10%, risk-free is 5%, the expected return on the market 10%, and then we want to figure out what the beta should be, okay, to satisfy this equation. Now then, just plug in the numbers 10, 5, and 10, right, and 5. Then what we see is 10 is equal to 5 plus 5 times beta, right? So then we have an equation that looks just like this. So what we do, we first move this 5 to the left-hand side, right, because the variable of interest happens to be on the right-hand side. So then 5 is equal to 5 times beta, and beta is equal to 5 divided by 5, which gives us 1. Right? So that's how we solve this equation for the unknown. Right? So in general, we can solve one equation for one unknown. Right? If we happen to have 2 equations, then we can solve the system of equations for 2 unknowns, which I'll show you in the next slide. Anyway, let's take a look at a different sort of version of the same equation. So here, we want to solve the same equation for expected return on the market. Right? So we have all the other pieces of information. So 10, again, 5% is the risk-free, and beta is 1. Again, the drill is to plug them all in and solve this equation for the unknown. And it happens so that we don't have to do much, right? So again, once you plug in, you will see 10 is equal to 5 plus expected return on the market minus 5. So that means that the expected return on the market has to be 10%. So that this equation would work, right? All right. So as advertised, when we have 2 equations, we can solve the whole thing, the 2 equations for 2 unknowns. So let's say we have 2 companies, okay, with a different costs of equity. So company 1 has got a cost of equity of 10% with a beta of 1. Second company has got a cost of equity of 15% with a beta of 2. Right? So, but both companies, both costs of equity need to satisfy the same equation. Right? So, given these 2 right, different companies, profiles, risk profiles, we can plug in right, separately. One by one. So equation 1, that's for company 1, 10% is equal to risk-free plus 1, company 1's beta, times expected return minus RF, or market equity premium, market risk premium. Right? Good. And for the second company, same drill, 15 is equal to RF plus 2 times market risk premium. Right? And notice that now we have 2 equations and 2 unknowns floating around, expected return on the market and a risk-free. Right? Now that because we have 2 equations, we can solve this so-called system of equations for these 2 unknowns. Right? Now again, the drill is divide and conquer. So basically, the strategy is to reduce the 2 equations down to 1 equation with only 1 unknown. Okay? There is no right answer. There are several ways to do so. And what I'm going to do is that, here's one way, one possible way. I noticed that RF, the same RF shows up. Okay? Upstairs and downstairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract equation 1 from equation 2, term by term. Right? Then when I do so, it's 15 minus 10, so that's 5. Right? RF minus RF, that gives me 0, and that's precisely why I did that, okay, to get rid of this term. 2 times market risk premium minus 1 times market risk premium, that leaves me just 1 times right, market risk premium. So from that, I know that the market risk premium has to be 5. Right? So then I can plug that back into either of the equation. Okay? I guess the top one is easier. Right? So the 10 is equal to risk-free plus 1 times 5. So that gives me risk-free of 5%. Right? And then that means that expected return on the market needs to be 10%, so that everything works. Right? Okay, that's one way. Or you can do this. You can set out to get rid of the second term. Now notice that the coefficients are different. So to get rid of the second term, you have to align the coefficients. So to do so, what you can do is to double everything on a top equation. All right. So then 20 is equal to 2 times RF plus 2 times market risk premium, and then do the same thing, right? Subtract term by term, okay? One equation from the other, all right? So then you will see the same answer. Or there is yet another way. You can expand the term, okay? So I cheated a bit here. I gave you the long-winded version first. Now, if you just eyeball the top equation and expand the term, you notice that the risk-free just drops out, because there's one times risk-free, and when you expand this term, that gives us minus 1 times risk-free. So if you just add and subtract, you get 0. Right? So that means that the expected return on the market needs to be 10 from the top equation alone, and that means that when you plug that into the second equation, right, you will see that risk-free needs to be 5. Right? So either way, there is no right answer. As long as it works, okay, you can get the same answer. All right? It's just that reduce the equation down to 1. Later on, we will see some examples where you need to work with three equations, system of equations consisting of 3 equations. Now, their drill is still the same. Reduce 3 equations down to 2, involving only 2 unknowns, and then 2 down to 1, involving only 1, so on and so forth. All right. All right. So I'll show you how to solve those equations. Solve such cases when the time comes. All right, so the next one up is exponents, or power. So first one up, a bullet point says that a negative power means a reciprocal, right? So x to minus a means 1 over x to a. Right? So that's the meaning of a negative exponent. Right? Now, fractional exponent, x to 1 over a, means 1/8 root of x. Okay? So in particular, when, well, let's say x to 1/2 power, let's say. Okay? What does it mean? It's the square root of x. So that's oftentimes the notation I use for square root. Right? For instance, when I denote standard deviation as a square root of variance, oftentimes I just write variance, okay, raised to the 1/2 power. Right? When it comes to arithmetic operations, you have to go 1 level down when you take it upstairs, right? So x to a times x to b is equal to, when you take that arithmetic operation upstairs, is equal to x to a plus b. So multiplication becomes addition, all right? And it only works when we deal with the same base of x in this case. X to a, raise the whole thing to power of b, that's equal to x to a times b, right? So power operation becomes a multiplication in this case upstairs. Now this is what we use, okay, to solve an equation involving powers. So x to a, let's say we have an equation that says x to a is equal to b. Right? What is x? Well, x, well, again, we do the same thing. We want to get rid of this a. How do we get rid of this a? Well, if we can multiply this power, exponent, by 1 over a, we will get 1. Right? And x to 1 is x itself, so we are good. So to get what we want, on the left-hand side, we have to do the same thing on the right-hand side. So x is equal to, in that case, b to 1 over a. Okay? So let me give you an example in the context of finance. So let's say we have a $1 investment made 3 years ago, okay? And we saw 10%, 20%, and 30% return on that. Okay? $1 investment over the 3-year period. Okay? So the first year, we see 10%. The whole thing grew at the rate of 20% in the second year, so on and so forth. Right? Now, we want to sort of summarize. So you can say, oh, well, I made 10, 20, and 30% over the last 30 years. I'm sorry, last 3 years. Or you can say, you can summarize these three numbers into one number. And that's what we are after. So we want to sort of summarize what happened after 3 years period with just one return figure. That's what we are after here. So basically we want, we hypothetically speaking, we assume that we got one return over 3-year period, year by year, okay? And that's, we denote that by x, okay? And if we receive that return three times, right, counting interest on interest, we want to get at the same place as we are now after these 3 years. What actually has happened, all right? So what has actually happened is that $1, our $1 investment made 3 years ago, grew to 1.716, right? And that's where we want to be, right? Hypothetically, in this hypothetical world. So we want to get x 3 times, okay? So 1 plus x. So year by year, $1 investment would grow at the rate of x. Okay? And we get that return 3 times. Okay? That's why we cube that 1 plus x. And we want to be equal, we want it to be equal to 1.716 where we are now. Okay? Now, so then if we set this equation up, okay, this way, then we notice that we are exactly in this situation. So what is x going to be? Well, first off, we need to get rid of this exponent first. So 1 plus x is equal to 1.716 raised to the 1/3 of the power, right? And then we get rid of this 1 by subtracting 1 from that. Right? So we see that's getting 10, 20, and 30% over the last 3 years is equivalent to getting 9.73% return 3 times, right? Year by year. Later on, we will define this return as geometric average return. Okay? But I will remind you when we get there. Right? Or this is another application of the exponents. So let's say we have a $1 investment that can be made for 2 years at 6% per annum, right? Or 4-year, an investment can be made for 4 years at 8% per annum now. Right? Now, what's the significance of this? Well, first of all, what's the significance of the maturity? Well, basically, this gives us the guarantee, right? Length of the time of the investment. So when someone says, okay, I'm going to give you 6% per annum for 2 years, right? That 6% is guaranteed for the 2-year, right? For the 2-year period, the first 2-year period. And similarly, 8% is guaranteed for 4-year period, right? Now, but the catch is that if you want to get that 8% return, you have to lock up your $1 investment for 4 years. Otherwise, you will not get that 8% return, right? So then the question is this. Well, imagine that I go for this 2-year investment, which is shorter, okay? And I get into another contract going from the end of year 2 to end of year 4, okay? Effectively making the whole thing a 4-year investment. Okay? So it's like going from now to year 4 straight away, or you can go from 0 to 2 and then 2 to 4. Okay? And then that's making a stop. Okay? That strategy, making a stop at the end of year 2, is represented on the right-hand side. Right? And what would be the contract interest rate that makes makes me break even, okay? Makes me equal, makes the whole thing equal, That's the question, right? So I know for a fact that if I go from now to year 4 straight away, at the end of year 4, okay, my $1 will grow to be that number, right? 1.08 raised to the 4th power, because I get 8% return 4 times. Okay? Interest with interest on interest. Now, if I go for the long-winded second strategy, making a stop at the end of year 2, then what I know is that at the end of year 2, I will have this much cash in my pocket, all right? So 1.6 squared. Now, but I combine this with another contract going from end of year 2 to end of year 4, and the rate is unknown, x, okay? And I know the whole thing is grow at the rate of x twice till the end of year 4. Okay? And I want the end result to be equal, so we set up the equation this way. All right? Again, so then what's going on? Well, again, we have x. We want to solve the whole thing for x, so we get rid of everything that's not x, right? So the first off is the coefficient there. So 1.08 raised to the 4th power divided by 1.06 by moving this term to the left-hand side, and the rest is the same. We could then get rid of the exponent there, all right? And then finally subtract 1 to get rid of this 1 in there, all right? And x happens, if you solve this equation, then x happens to be 10.04%, right? So basically what it says is that if you get 8% 4 times for a 4-year period, it's the same thing as getting 6% in the first 2 years and 10.04% in the third and 4th year, right? And we will call it a forward rate when the time comes. Yeah? Well, again, I will remind you when the time comes. All right, the next one up is a straight line, right? Geometry, and very simple geometry. So straight line, now it's typically used for this cost of equity function or equation. So, well, in general, in mathematics, oftentimes the generic form of a line is depicted this way, right? Y is equal to mx plus b, right? So y and x are the variables of interest. Y is typically a response variable. X is an input variable, and there is a coefficient on x, which is m, and there's an additive term b. Right? Now, when you plot things up on the xy plane, x being on a horizontal axis and y being on a vertical axis, these numbers mean something, right? So b happens to be the y-intercept when you plot things up on this xy plane, and m is the slope, right? It tells us how steep, right, the line is. All right, so for example, when we deal with the cost of equity equation here, now we have to first decide which is x variable and which is y variable, and the convention is to take beta as x variable and expected return as y variable. So the idea is that the riskier the company is, the higher the cost of equity is, right? So risk determines the return, basically. All right, now given that convention, given that definition, now what are the y-intercepts and the slope? Now slope is determined by whatever that gets multiplied to beta, right? That happens to be market risk premium, expected return on the market minus RF, and y-intercept is given by risk-free, right? So given numbers, you can plot things up on x and y plane. Oh, sorry, beta and expected return plane. We call that risk and return plane, right? So risk is beta on the horizontal axis. Return is expected return plotted on the vertical axis, right? Now, the next one, the last bit of this review is the parabola. It basically is the geometric representation of squares, right? Quadratic equation, right? So here, the idea is this: y is equal to a quadratic function of x. Okay, by quadratic, what I mean is that it involves x squared term. All right. So generic representation of a quadratic function is this: y is equal to a, any a, times x squared plus b, any b, times x plus c. Right? Now, there's only one application that we are going to use this quadratic function for, and that's when we find out the minimum value of this quadratic function. Okay? Or maximum, you can find the maximum depending on the sign of a. Now, so on the sign of a, now if a is greater than 0, if a is positive, then what we know is that it gives us a curve, right? And curve opens upwards. Right? So we have a curve that looks like this. When a is negative, it's flipped backwards, right? So what we have is a curve opening up downwards like this. Right? So if a is greater than, if a is positive, then we can find out the minimum. If a is negative, then we can find out the maximum. All right, so, and to get the maximum or minimum, right, what we need is so-called a vertex. Now, vertex is the dead center of this curve, okay? So that's the value of x, where the whole thing is centered around, all right? Now, that can be, basically, that can be given as minus minus b divided by 2a. Okay? All right? Yeah. So, well, why is it not there? Sorry, I left the crucial piece of information out. All right, so it's minus b divided by 2a. Right, vertex is. So, for example, if we have a quadratic function, okay, of w, okay, and we want to minimize the value of v, then what we see is that if we plug in the value of vertex for v, for x variable, or w in this case, we get the minimum, right? Because here, so that when it's dead center, that's where the minimum occurs. Right? So first figure out the vertex. It's minus, so what is b? b is minus 1 and a is 1, right? So minus b is minus 1 times minus 1, which is 1, divided by 2 times a, 2 times 1, that gives us 1/2, right? So just plug in 1/2 there. And we know, by doing so, we know that that gives us the value of v, which is smaller than anything else, okay, on this curve. So then, if you plug in the numbers, then it's 3/4. It gives me 3/4. Okay? Or that's sort of a geometric way to find the minimum. Or you can use calculus now, right? In calculus, what do we do? Well, to get the minima or maxima, what we do is we differentiate the function, okay? and set the derivative equal to 0 to find where the minima or maxima, okay, occur. So if you differentiate this function with respect to w, what we see is that the derivative is 2w minus 1, setting equal to 0. Again, we get the same number, w equal to 1/2. Plug that in, and what we see is the minima in this case. Right? Good. So this particular application is going to be used when we figure out when the variance, okay, of a portfolio is minimized. So remember the variance? Variance is one squared measure. So naturally, when we express the variance as a function of something, and that something gets squared, all right? So as a result, typically we get a quadratic function for the variance, and when we want to minimize the variance to set the value for that something, okay, we run into this sort of a problem. Okay? And that's what we're going to use this property. All right, so that's the end of Math and Stats Review. And as I said, if you're bored to death when I've been going through this Math and Stats Review, you're in very good shape, right? So you don't have to worry anything about Math and Stats as far as this course is concerned. Now, if you're a bit rusty, then take a look at a few end of chapter problems here and there, and just tackle a few, and I'm pretty sure you will get back to you. Let's see. All right, I still have 15 minutes left, so let me just start on this the new chapter. Yeah. Chapter 1 and 2. Right? All right, so it's called Investment Alternatives, and basically it sort of outlines the financial securities available to the investors in general, right? So it describes what's available in the market. Now this is a very descriptive chapter, right? So I wouldn't, again, I don't know how to sort of describe something in an interesting way. So I will go fairly quickly, and I'll trust that you will read the text, okay, 1 and 2. Now this is where you will benefit from reading the textbook. Okay? So it's more efficient for you to just read up than listening to me, I guess. Okay? All right. So before we explain what's available, or we see what's available in the market, there are a few sort of, a few overview, okay, of what's investment and so on and so forth. Again, you can read the textbook. What I want to sort of point out here is that the investor we have in mind, right, we have tremendous respect for the investors. Okay, so we never ever assume that investors are not smart. Okay, so all the time in this course, investors in our mind are smart investors, knowing what they're doing. Okay, and what do I mean by knowing what they're doing? They do what's the best for them. Okay? What do we mean by the best? Well, they make decisions that maximize their expected welfare. Okay? So basically, they are making decisions that make them, okay, the richest on average in the next period. What do you mean by on average? Well, because, well, nothing is certain in our world, right? So we take risk as granted, right? So there is risk. Now, given the risk, how the investors make decisions? Well, they make decisions so that they are the richest or the wealthiest on average next period. And that's the sort of a typical smart investor, or we call them rational investors, that we envision in this course. Okay, so what are the decisions they have to make? They have to make investment decisions in our world, in this course. So what do you mean by investment decisions? Well, they need to sort of figure out what to buy and how much. And they are not limited to just one asset. So when they spread their money over different assets, we call that portfolio, a portfolio. So portfolio is nothing but a collection of different assets. Okay? Now we can form portfolios by mixing up or buying a bunch of different securities, or you can also make up a portfolio by buying up different asset classes. For instance, you can buy an entire New Zealand domestic equity, right? U.S. equity, U.S. bonds, so on and so forth. Okay? So you can think of a portfolio as a collection of different asset classes, or you can think of a portfolio as the collection of different securities. Right? And decisions made, well, you can make a decision top down. You can sort of figure out which asset class you want to buy first and how much, and then decide on the individual securities within each asset class later on. That's top down. Or you can go bottom up. Okay? You just pick up individual securities as you go, and the final result is basically your portfolio. So again, if you read a textbook, it gives you more examples, so on and so forth. Real versus financial assets. Well, we're primarily going to deal with financial assets. Now, real assets are assets used to produce goods and services. So they are real assets. They produce something, right? So for instance, properties, plants, equipment, human capital, so on and so forth, that produce real things. They are called real assets. On the other hand, financial assets, although they are called assets, don't produce anything by themselves. Instead, they are just claims to the real outcomes or real produced goods and services, okay, stemming from those real assets. An example would be equity, right? Well, what gives you, if you buy a share, what does it give you? It gives you a claim to a company, right? Now, that's what a company is, a collection of real assets. The company has got properties, plants, and equipment to do real thing, right? Produce a real thing. And a share of that company gives you a claim on that outcome, right? Goods and services that it produces. Yeah. That security gives you well, it promises certain cash flows, and those cash flows are backed by these real assets, right? So, or what's being produced by these real assets, right? So on and so forth. So, financial. We are going to focus on financial assets in this course, and this is basically what good does the financial market bring to the economy. So I mean, there is a huge debate even in finance whether the finance industry is too big or not. Right. So if you read a Wall Street Journal or something, Wall Street is worth more than 10% of the U.S. GDP. And going back to this definition, real versus financial assets, well, you can say that they're just flipping papers, right? Those Wall Street, those investment bankers in Wall Street, you know, they don't produce anything real themselves. They just, you know, deal with the financial assets. They flip papers. So why or what good, okay, is that flipping paper bring to the economy? Well, it's a kind of partial answer, right, to that question. First off, those financial markets allow us to time the consumption, all right? So let's say you finally graduate, all right, and you landed that big job, let's say, all right? Let's say it's a really big job. So you know for certain that next year your paycheck will be, I don't know, millions, all right? Right after graduation. What are you going to do then? So what you have is just a job offer in your hand, but you know that the next year you're going to be $1 million richer. If you're a guy, probably my guess is that you're going to buy a car, or a fancy car, a sports car. How do you achieve that though? Well, you will see a banker and borrow, right? Against the future guaranteed income that you're going to make, right? Or if you're a pensioner, you have a bunch of cash, but you don't want to spend all that cash today. What are you going to do? Well, you defer your consumption by going to a bank and deposit that cash, right? So basically, financial markets allow us to time the consumption. When you are short of cash, right, people like sort of a constant stream of consumption. Right? No one likes to go, 10 hamburgers per day and go, hungry next day. Instead, people are a lot happier with just 5 constant stream of hamburgers per day. Right? And financial markets basically allow us to do so. Right? So that's one good thing about financial markets. Another good thing about financial markets is that it allows us to allocate the risk. So risk is, to bear the risk, you need money, right? So for instance, let's say Bill Gates, all right? Now, he founded Microsoft, right? And basically, well, it's in a risky environment, you never know what's going to happen next day to Microsoft. So, I mean, if there's no financial markets, then it's Bill Gates' risk and Bill Gates' risk alone. Right? Now, with the help of financial markets, he can unload a bit of shares, right? A lot of shares to others who are willing to bear that risk for him, of course, for a potential reward. Okay? So basically, with the financial markets, risk goes to where? Goes to people who are willing to bear that risk. And that it's the separation of ownership and management is kind of corollary to this risk allocation. So when you're good at managing companies, right? Typically, managing company comes with a risk. Now you can separate that management and bearing risk. Right? So shareholders take the risk, while professional managers can manage the company doing what they're doing the best. Right? Now, if you in 251, and if you're going to take a 351, that gives rise to a core problem in corporate finance, which is called agency problem. The owner is not the manager. Right? So oftentimes their interests are misaligned, right? And that's called agency problem. And to sort of address that agency problem, oftentimes we see performance-based compensation, stock options, right? So on and so forth, so that managers get rewarded when they enhance the wealth of the owners or shareholders. Right? And oftentimes there are sort of threats that work, okay? Carrot and so if the managers absolutely shirk, then there are people out there, the company's value will tank, and there are people out there who's willing to take over the company. And guess what the new owner is going to do? First thing, they will sack the managers, right? So threat of takeover is another mechanism that keeps this agency problem in check. And there's also board of directors, right? Other than a CEO or the manager, top manager, who has some say on important decisions made by the company. Right? All right, the players, net borrow, business, household, government, and financial intermediaries. So here, our focus is on this household. Right? Okay, the supplier of funds, okay, savers, they have cash and they want to invest their cash in something, all right, and hence they want to price those things that they want to invest in. Now, every now and then we will come across these financial intermediaries. Right? They're just middlemen, all right. For instance, commercial banks, investment companies, insurance companies, so on and so forth. We will spend a tiny bit of time somewhere along the line discussing investment bankers, what they do, so on and so forth. But by and large, we are going to look at the problems faced by those net savers, okay, in this course. All right, I think this is a good place to let you go. I will see you next week. Have a good weekend. Oh, there's no workshop this week, right? No workshop this week. Workshops start next week.
You will be talking about the 9th edition, the 10th edition, so it's better to get the 10th edition. Awesome, thank you.